Morning, and good to see all of you. Right, so I think this is a continuation, right? Maybe the last session on the Sigalovada Sutta. So it's a long name, Sigalovada Sutta, right? So usually we shorten it just Sigala Sutta. So it's basically named after this young man, youth, right, named Sigala. So I'm not going to go through the background. I think you have all been exposed. You already know that, right? Good. So I'm saying that I will just go straight to these aspects of it. So I think there are 6 areas in the discourse the Buddha gave. So as you can see, is DN31. So it's one of the discourses in the long discourses. So actually, it's a pretty long discourse, and the importance of this discourse is quite obvious because it has got a lot to do with lay Buddhists, people like you and me, right? And because sometimes people think that the Buddha only taught for monks and nuns. But actually, he has given so many discourses which actually talks about the lay people, how they live their life, and so on, right? So this is one of them. In fact, in Buddha Gosha, I think many of you know as the commentator, right? He says that this is the Sigalovada Sutta. It's actually like the Vinaya for the householders, right? So in others, it's a very important one. Now, I think the original title given to me was what master-servant relationship, right? So I think that's a very antiquated term, all right? Maybe use it in the legal perspective. So maybe let's use a more contemporary title, employer-employee relationship, right? I think all of you are either employers or employees, right? Can I know how many are employers here? All employees? One employer, okay. All right, so all of us are employees, right? Self-employed, okay. So self-employed, you're the boss, right? Okay, so self-employed, okay, you're the boss. So let's see what are the things that we can gather from here. Right, so I think we have already said that this is a classic text on lay ethics and social responsibility, so it exposes the whole conduct of domestic as well as social duties of a layman, according to the Buddhist point of view. Now, so here we are talking about reciprocal acts of those he honors, are represented 4 directions: horizontal plane, east, west, and north, and then we call the nadir and the zenith. Right? I think you're familiar. So he elaborated on how to respect and support them, and how in turn the 6 will return the kindness and support. So these are the 6 directions. I think you already know that. So today we are basically just covering this so-called nadir. Isn't it? Yeah, we have gone through all the rest. Have you? Okay. Or have you? Or is there one more coming? So you've covered what? Husband and wife? Yes. You've covered friends and companions? Not yet. You've covered teacher and pupil, and then parents and children. So you're left with friends, companions, ascetics and laity, and then employee. Okay. So today we'll touch a little bit on this. Now, in the discourse itself, I'll just give you it says there are 5 ways in which a master or the employer, right? So here I've just take the actual translation. I think this is a Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation. So there are 5 ways in which a master or an employer should administer to by their master as the nadir, right? I think I've got should be employer first, yeah. So there are 5 ways in which a master should administer to his servants. So here servants, again, as I say, is a very antiquated term, right? So let's use the word employee as his nadir. So here the Buddha talks about 5 things: by allocating work according to aptitude, providing wages and food, looking after them if sick, sharing special treats, giving reasonable time off work. So I think you have to understand this was given in the context 2,600 years ago. So the situation will be slightly different from today. But I think what we can understand is that fundamentally what the Buddha taught can still be applied today. But we have to look at it from a more contemporary perspective. Right? 2,600 years ago, that was what? That was not even, that was the Bronze Age. Was it the Bronze Age, right? So, and today we are, 2,600 years later. But a lot of what the Buddha has given us so long ago, if we look back, we reflect on it, you find that actually there's a lot of relevance. But we've got to see it from a more contemporary perspective. So let's just look at each of the 5, all right? Role of the employer, okay? So let's look at the first one, which is allocating work according to aptitude. So before that, there's also, the Buddha talks about there are 5 ways in which the servants or the employees thus administered to by the masters, the nadir will reciprocate. So this is what the employee is supposed to do. But before we come to that, let's go to the employer part, right? So in a modern context, all right, it is when he said that what we would call a job-person match, all right? A job-person match. So you assign them work according to their skills. Right? If you need to employ an accountant, obviously you look for someone who has got a CPA or ACCA, right? You don't go and look for someone who has got, say, a Bachelor of Engineering, for example. Okay, so of course the Buddha didn't use those kind of wordings because first and foremost you understand that the Buddha was a spiritual teacher, but because the spiritual practice doesn't operate in a vacuum. Okay, it doesn't operate in a vacuum. Just as, for example, you've got the ethical part as lay people. Even during the Buddha's time, you find that he was dealing not only with monks, he was dealing with kings, he was dealing with business people, right? He was dealing with ordinary farmers. He was dealing with, even as they say, the ordinary man in the street. So he has to relate to them. But today, we can see this as, for example, as a job-person match, all right, as an employer, all right. So do you assign them work according to their skills, all right? If you're looking for someone to do accounting work, you don't expect that person to be able to do engineering work. So that's simply basic. And then here it says work given to an employee should be chosen as appropriate to that person's age, qualification, gender, and disposition, and also capability, all right? So these are some of those things. Today, increasingly, even though retirement age is 60, or in some countries 65, but you find that if they continue to work after that, so maybe they're assigned different type of roles, maybe more of an advisory nature, right? So you can look at also in that context. And together with this is also the role of the employer to ensure that there's a continuous training and development, isn't it, for efficiency. All right. Maybe during the Buddha's time, all those things were not mentioned because it was very much an agrarian society. But if we look at it in today's context, when the Buddha says, that the employer role is to make sure that the employee has got the right aptitude for things, and aptitude is something that can also be developed, isn't it? All right. We said skills, knowledge, skills. All right. Basically, they are actually a couple of things: knowledge, skills, attitude. All right, 3 basic things. Maybe attitude a bit difficult to develop, but definitely knowledge and skills you can develop. All right, and normally when the person has got the right knowledge, he has got the right skills, because he's able to do his job, his attitude also changes. All right, I think research has shown that sometimes an employee's attitude becomes bad because he doesn't know what to do. And he doesn't know what to do. Maybe he was given the wrong task to perform, or he wasn't given the right training and development. Okay, so all those things I think has got to do with what we call a job-person match. So back to the first point, which the Buddha says about by allocating work according to aptitude. So even though this was said like 2,600 years ago, so we look at it from today's perspective. Yeah. Okay. So the first point, back to the first point, allocating work according to aptitude, is also from the Buddhist perspective. I think the understanding or the belief is that if given the opportunity, we can all excel. Why do I say that? Because you look at from the spiritual perspective, there's this concept called the Buddha nature, that we all have within us the Buddha seed, that all of us have that ability to become enlightened. All right? You can say this is very much a Mahayana kind of perspective, but even in the Theravada teachings, for example, the first discourse in the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha says the mind is luminous. Remember, Pabasara. So the mind is luminous, it becomes defiled by adventitious thoughts that comes into the mind. All right, so then Buddha gave methods like the 4 right efforts. How do we overcome those things? So if you interpret in that perspective, then you know that from the Buddhist perspective, we all have that ability to achieve what we want to do. Of course, in the Buddhist context, you are following the Mahayana tradition, they talk about tasnas, sachnas, tathagata garbha. So we all have that Buddha nature within us. Okay. Now, in a modern context, right, in a more contemporary context, for example, my organization itself, our corporate philosophy, our corporate culture is based on the belief that every employee has what we call infinite potential. Every employee has infinite potential to grow, to be successful, to achieve what you set out to achieve. All right. So then, and not only my organization, I think there are many organizations that believe in that. Essentially, if you look at management thinking, there are 2 schools of thought. One says that people are lazy, employees are lazy, they're out there to cheat you. So as a result, you got to watch their every step. That's what it's called Theory X, isn't it? You familiar with the concept, Theory X? Then there's another Theory Y. Theory Y, which says that actually human beings are not lazy, they are not out to cheat you. You know, they are there to, if you give them opportunities, you train them well, they will perform. All right, so this is a concept called Theory X, Theory Y. I think it was many years ago by this American management guru called Douglas McGregor. So you can Google Douglas McGregor, and then you find Theory X, Theory Y. So the Buddhist approach, as an employer, is more to adopt the Theory Y approach. All right. So it's not it's not something that's alien to Buddhist teachings. If you're familiar with the concept that we all have that Buddha nature, we all have that seed, that Buddha seed. We all have that seed for enlightenment. Because if we don't, then what's the point of practicing? Isn't it? What's the point of practicing? All right. So by allocating work according to aptitude, a very important belief is that people can excel if given the opportunity. I think that's a very important point. Yeah. And from the Buddhist perspective, when you look at this so-called master-servant relationship, today in modern management, we will use the term mutual selection. Some of you may have heard of the term called mutual selection. So it's a term which means that the employer needs to know what the employee needs. What are the needs of the employee? And of course, the employee needs also to understand the company's vision, mission, goals, objectives, strategies, so that there's a mutual understanding. So in modern management thinking, we call it mutual selection. Yeah? Okay? So it's very important. So as an employer, all right, of course, you are self-employed, then maybe you don't need to have too many people to talk about. But the moment you have got people working for you, they need to understand what are your vision, your mission, your aspirations, and so on. And as an employee, how do you help to achieve those, right, on a thing? So that's allocating work according to aptitude. So we can look at it from many, many angles in today's context. Now the second one is providing wages and food. Pretty straightforward, isn't it? But in a modern context, what does it mean? So it is like compensation, right? Isn't it? Compensation. Buddha maybe didn't use the word compensation, right? Maybe he didn't use words like benchmarking, today we use all those words, right? So, but obviously that's what the Buddha meant, all right? Salary, of course, then in today's context, you got to make sure that you pay people the minimum wage, right? Now we have changed our minimum wage, 1,005 from 1,002, isn't it? Or 1,003, I have forgotten about that. And when we did that, our company, we had to set aside 800, almost $1 million, just to pay the workers, all right, and additional 300 ringgit per employee, all right? So you have to do that. That is in compliance with the law, all right? So as a good employer, So you need to do that, okay? So wage increase, also to overcome inflation, that's why we give annual increment. All right, sometimes annual increment, we always said, it's merit pay, all right, merit pay for good performance. And then bonuses, all right, to reward for past years, all right? So I think we all know, when an employer pays bonuses, it's because his employee has done well, or the company has done well, isn't it? The company has done well, the employee have done well, so you give bonuses, all right? And bonuses for the past year. So you give him salary increment. That's not for the past year, that's for his future, for the additional work that you want him to do for the next 12 months perhaps. So even though again the Buddha may not go into details like that, but at the back of his mind, when he talk about give them the right wages, so in today's contemporary context, you can see it in that angle. Yeah. So today we also talk about merit pay. Why? So that there's kind of fairness, isn't it? Fairness and equity, right? So we don't so much talk about equality, but we talk about equity, right? Because you can't pay everybody equally, isn't it? But you got to pay people equitably, all right? Okay? So I'm sure you know what that means. Again, I don't think the Buddha went into details like, okay, is this an equitable pay or is it an equal pay? But in today's context, we understand the overall perspective. Maybe incentives to motivate employees, right? So, and fringe benefits. So, employee must be happy, isn't it? If the employee is not happy, then you find that it's difficult for him to achieve what the company wants him to achieve, okay? And the other thing from the Buddhist perspective is, we always talk about the difference between success and happiness. Which one comes first, all right? I've seen many successful people, right? But they're not happy, right? My previous boss, immediate previous boss, well, he's in fact one of the richest men in the world. Forbes magazine, he's in the top 25. Every year when the age comes out with who are the richest men in Malaysia, he's always top 3. And once he told me, he said that, how I wish my children, would take over my business. So he's not happy. He said when he compared to another tycoon, he's so happy to see that the daughter is involved in construction, the son is involved in management, but he said his son is not interested. The daughter is more interested to go into charity to spend his money. All right. So I said that's good, at least, Of course I didn't say, there's good karma, but so success need not necessarily lead to happiness. But research has shown that when you are happy, then automatically you also lead to success. All right? If you're not happy at your work, do you think you will be able to do a good job? I think it's going to be difficult, right? Isn't it? All right? Okay? All right, so compensation. So that's the other thing as an employer. So those of you, maybe today you're not yet an employer. Now, employer, that doesn't mean that you have to be the chairman of the company. Employer could mean that you are the boss, who can make decisions that affects your employees. Yeah, so look at it in that sense. Okay? So I'm not the boss of this company. This company has got 85,000 people. And the real boss is not here, but in a way I have got influence, I've got an impact on what I do on many other people. So in that sense, I'm also considered an employer. So I got to be very mindful of the actions that I take because it will affect many other people. Yeah. So that's compensation. Okay. Now the other one is medical benefits. Again, during the Buddha's time, it's interesting that he talks about that. Now what was the literal translation there? Looking after them is sick. You see, during the Buddha's time, of course, he didn't talk about, you should buy medical insurance, you have to, send, I don't think there were even hospitals there, but the fact that he talks about, look after them if sick. So today in our context, what does that mean? All right, as an employer. Okay, let's see. So medical benefit, care for them in time of sickness, provide for sick leave. All right? So I hope you work for a company that has got sick leave. Anyone who works for a company that's got no sick leave, if you are sick, you take annual leave. I hope. I hope you don't work for such a company. Yeah. So, and how many days sick leave, I think a lot of it also mandated by law today, yeah, okay. Provide for hospitalization. There's a difference between sick leave, hospitalization leave, right? So I think, again, don't say, did the Buddha say this? I don't think the Buddha mentioned things like hospitalization leave. And take some medical insurance, right? Ensure a healthy environment for all staff. Now, when you talk about caring of the sick, there's both the preventive part as well as the so-called curative part, isn't it? So as a responsible employer, then you should also ensure that the environment is a healthy environment, correct? So how do you do that? Okay, so many ways. Healthy here can also mean a safe environment, safety and health, isn't it? That's why, and of course today, we also have the, what is that? OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Act, right? So all those things are, you can say, you can trace back to what the Buddha, just make it a statement, take care of people who are sick. And of course there's always the preventive part, making sure people are not sick. All right, so that's why many organizations, they organize like health talks, right, for the employees. Because if you are sick, then it will affect the productivity of the company. Then the concept of what I mentioned earlier on, mutual selection comes into play. Isn't it? The employer wants the employee to be well so that the employee can contribute. In one of my previous jobs when I was working for a commercial bank, the big boss once told the senior team, he said, you want to enjoy yourself, you want to drink, that's fine. You can drink up to your heart's content. But please remember, if you drink until you fall sick, you're no more good to me. You're no more useful to me. So I think that's a very poignant point. That sometimes we fail to realize that we are only useful to an organization if we are healthy. If you're always sick, you can't contribute. And the company eventually will have no choice but to give you, maybe starting with a prolonged medical leave and then eventually medically bought you out. Isn't it true? Right? So sometimes we also have, that's why, again, back to my point about mutual selection. Okay? The employer needs you because you can contribute, because you are healthy. If you are not healthy, can the employer still continue to keep you? You can't, isn't it? So sometimes we also have to take care of oneself. That's why in Buddhism, we say self-reliance. Correct? Isn't it? No one saves us but ourselves. When I first learned Buddhism many, many years ago, when I was younger than many of you, there was a song called No One Saves Us But Ourselves. All right? Okay? I'm not sure who sang it. Was it Victor or Huat Chai? I can't remember who sang that song. Okay, so ensure a healthy environment for all staff. It reminds me of a Thai proverb which I learned many years ago, which they say is, if you use them means the employees, when they are healthy, take responsibility for them too when they are sick. Right? Is it? So I think it's a very important point here. So these are the third point, yeah? Now the fourth one, let's go back. What did Buddha mean here? Okay, sharing special treats. Now that was the term used, so Bhikkhu Bodhi has translated that. So what does it mean by giving them special treats? So in today's context, what do you expect an employer to do? To give special treats. So we can look at it in different ways. Culture of care, isn't it? Is a caring organization, a culture of care. Sharing goodies, for example, during special occasions, maybe mooncakes. I think mooncakes is coming, right? Even though people tell me it's still Ghost Month, right? It's supposed to be Ghost Month now, but people are already making mooncakes and distributing mooncakes. Right? I've already got two gifts of mooncake, even though it's Ghost Month, right? So sharing special occasions, mooncakes, cookies during the Deepavali, which our organization do, and I know many organizations also do that during Hari Raya. So this is just show that you care for the people, and you care for diversity, isn't it? For diverse. Now, maybe during the Buddha's time, there was really no need for diversity. Everybody. But again, having said that, I was said that even during the Buddha's time, there were so many different dialects, All right. So obviously, there will be different dialect groups. People are different, and I think in one of the discourse, the Buddha said that one should speak in a language that the people can understand. So which means that there are many different dialects. So maybe there was also a diverse community during the Buddha's time. But today, particularly in Malaysia, I think we need very much a D&I policy, D&I, diversity and inclusion policy. So if you have a D&I policy in your company, then you consciously make it a point that you will not be racist. Then you make it a point. I don't think we are generally racist, but it's just that basically sometimes we forget people of other ethnic groups. I give a very good example. Today, increasingly, I think every young Malaysian Chinese speaks Mandarin, right? In fact, they can't even speak dialects anymore. They only speak Mandarin. So naturally, when they meet, they no longer use English. They use Mandarin. But Malaysia is an organized, but you're not in China. Malaysia, even in China, if you're in Sichuan, I think not everybody can understand you, So, but when you meet in the office, when you use Mandarin, and you may have a poor Indian guy who sit next to you, and he'll be wondering, what on earth are you talking about? You see, or a Malay guy, isn't it? Just as, for example, you work for an organization where predominantly, say, Malays, and if the Malays come from Kelantan, then they meet, they speak Kelantanese, even your understanding of Bahasa Malaysia, you don't know what they're talking about, right? So do you like that kind of environment? I don't think you do, all right? But I don't think, again, that we are deliberately doing that, but because we are not conscious, we are not mindful. That's why mindfulness becomes so important. So it becomes, as an employer, to have a policy which makes it very clear that in an organization, use a language that everybody can understand. And that's what the Buddha said, right? I think in the Arana Vibhanga Sutta, you read the Arana Vibhanga Sutta, the Buddha talks about that. How important it is for us to relate to someone. Don't use a language which only that particular group can understand. Use a language everybody can understand, right? That's why the European community uses English, right? I don't know, maybe there are a few other languages, right? English, definitely not Russian, right? Okay, all right. So I think this is a culture of care. So we can interpret it, we can expand what the Buddha has said into something. Now, when we expand all this thing, we are not saying that this is what the Buddha actually said. And I hope you don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that's what the Buddha said. Because obviously, I don't think Buddha talks in that manner. But I think we can extrapolate. And then when we do these things, we ask ourselves, are these actions, do they bring harm to oneself and others? No, it doesn't bring harm to oneself. Is it something wholesome? Is it something useful? Right? It is something useful. So then we can do it. All right? Remember, 2,600 years ago, so I'm not a fundamentalist. I'm not a fundamentalist because I think while fundamentally many of the Buddha's teachings are still true, but some aspects of it we have to adapt. All right. So there's always the need to be very careful, adaptability and authenticity. All right. We must be very, very careful with these two things. While we adapt, the authenticity of the teachings are still there. Okay, so how do we know that? By referring back to, for example, other aspects of the teachings. Does that action of yours, does it cause harm to yourself? Does it cause harm to others? Or does it bring goodness? Does it bring fairness to other people? So we interpret in that manner. Okay? So maybe organize birthday celebrations for staff. Right? It is good, to just send every employee, you know, maybe even an email. It doesn't cost you anything. So just to let people know that, we celebrate your birthday. It's your birthday, you know, and so on. Small things, right? But it helps. And giving donations during national calamities or death of the employees' parents, all right? So in some companies, you know, they said if someone like a parent pass away, you know, they'll give a small donation, all right, or give a wreath, all right. People collect money, all right. Chinese call it white gold, isn't it? White gold. Maybe Westerners don't have white gold. Right? We have white gold, right? So you'll give donations during national calamities or death of an employee. So all those things is to create the culture of caringness, okay? And this, again, very close to compassion, isn't it? Because in Buddhist teachings, we always talk about compassion. And many people for a long time think that, compassion is something, you know, is only good, you know, if you look at it from the point of view of religion. But today, you find that compassion is such an important mental quality that the organizations are beginning to see how they can even cultivate aspects of compassion, you know. It was interesting, like if you Google this Stanford University, they have got, in the medical school, there's even a department called C-CARE, C-C-A-R-E, Center for, you know, Compassion and Altruistic Studies. So why would a reputable institution like Stanford University, or I think even UCLA, right? They have the departments which study compassion in the corporate environment, how an organization that uses compassion, you find that the organizations are actually more successful, right? And if you Google, you find such articles in HBR, for example. You know, HBR, Harvard Business Review. You find these articles appearing in Harvard Business Review. They don't appear in Eastern Horizon, or, you know, they appear in Harvard Business Review, talking about compassion, all right? Okay? So culture of care, the other very important Buddhist element is humility, all right? Humility. That means you say, well, there are other people that I also should think of. So they're all interrelated, all right? And it's something that we have to inculcate in maybe our bosses. And if you're a boss, please bear this in mind. Because in the Mangala Sutta, one of the 38 blessings is humility, isn't it? And again, if you think that humility is a very religious, you know, a very, you know, airy, they call it very airy type of thing, you know, not relevant in today's world. But, you know, there's a book called From Good to Great, many years ago, by a guy called Jim Collins. I'm sure some of you may have heard if you have taken classes on management. Jim Collins said that in terms of leadership, the highest level of leadership, which he calls level 5 leadership, is when the leader exhibits humility. You see, so that's not an 8. I don't think Jim Collins is a Buddhist, but it's a quality, it's a universal quality which the Buddha talks about, the Buddha emphasized. And today, in the contemporary context, Jim Collins says that to be a successful leader, humility is very important. Right? So, or humanity. In our organization, one of the 7 tenets of leadership is have humanity. We don't use the word humility. We try to be different. Even though in our leadership programs, we always use Jim Collins as an example. Okay? So, have humility, right? So these are the 4th one. And the 5th one is vacation leave. All right. So can you imagine that the Buddha talking about that? Give reasonable time off work. Right? Of course, you see, don't ask me a question, did the Buddha talks about 4-day work week or not? I mean, I don't know. Right? I don't think he did, all right? Okay? But there's examples, you see. So the Buddha has that insight way into the future, all right? So he talks about give appropriate number of days for employees to take leave, right? So that's really astounding, isn't it? Really astounding that you have something 2,600 years ago, the Buddha saying such things. At a time when slavery was common, and kings, have 4 wives, 5 wives. Well, it doesn't mean that nowadays king don't have that, right? They still have that. Okay. So when employees, in a modern context, when employees are not able to utilize their leave due to exigencies of work, allow them to carry forward or be paid in lieu and not to be forfeited, isn't it? All right? Okay? It varies culture to culture. Like in Australia, if you have annual leave, you can't finish annual, you can't forfeit by law. you can't, right? I used to work for a company where when the boss says, well, I want that to be standard throughout the whole world, all right? I said, look, boss, you can't do that in Australia. This is a law against that, okay? So, well, because you want them to finish their leave. You see, why it's important that companies should have, say, X number of leave, say 20 days, 22 days, and why is it important for you to plan the leave? Because from the point of view of the company, if the employees don't take leave, they may overwork. If they overwork, the productivity may drop, and then you study in economics, it's called the law of what? Marginal utility, right? Law of marginal utility, or diminishing returns, law of diminishing returns. So because of that, it's also to the interest of the company to ensure that your employees have got annual leave, takes leave. And for the employee, it helps them to actually, recuperate, or so that they are fresh, they come back to work. Okay? So again, as I said, I don't think the Buddha was thinking in that sense, I don't know, but surely in today's context, when the Buddha says employers should give leave, time off, so in today's context, we can think of all those things. Yeah? Okay? Right. So these are the 5 things, okay? So you can interpret it, huh? Now, role of, okay, so these are just a couple of things that I thought I add on. So one distinguishing feature of any good employer is that he or she adjusts the work to suit the workers as much as possible, and also to provide challenge where that is helpful. Right? I think the word challenge is very important. Yeah. Remember, if your assumption is that every employee has that infinite potential to excel, then you must give them challenges. You must stretch. You must stretch them, but don't overstretch. Don't do break. All right. So the question is, how much can you stretch? Yeah. Reasonable, isn't it? It has to be a reasonable stretch. Moves people towards the areas in which they feel the most interest and confidence. So in today's context, we talk about job rotation, isn't it? Right? So of course, again, the Buddha wasn't talking about job rotation, but we understand in the context, by implication, all these things become very important. Okay, your job rotation. So maybe it's more art than science, and a good manager will work at it every day. So it's a win-win situation, what I call a mutual selection. Earlier I told you. So employers and bosses will take responsibility for their employees in these 5 ways. What happens is they were able to cultivate a mind of loving kindness and compassion instead of simply thinking to take advantage of others. All right. So yesterday I was facilitating a workshop at Barb's. So the topic was about conflict at the workplace. Right. So I think we all have conflict, isn't it? There's no. It would be very naive of us to think that we work in an organization there's no conflict. Just like there's office politics. There's bound to be office politics. Right? Office politics is everywhere. The question is, do we play good politics and not bad politics? Right? The question is, do we play good politics, or do we know how to play good politics? Okay? So if you do all those things, a win-win situation, okay? So for a boss to have all these features of a true friend is something that doesn't occur by accident. So it's a culture that needs to be instilled. So my suggestion is, whenever you want to join an organization, the first thing you need to find out is, of course, whether the company is making money or not making money. You don't want to join a company that's, is going to be wound down in the next 6 months, But if such a company you go in with because you are there to to do a reverse takeover or you to re-engineer, then it's fine. But do not join a company when you're not sure what you don't even have a financial positive cash flow to pay your salaries. So that's one. The other thing is, of course, try to find out the culture of that company. And if we are Buddhists, we are practicing the Dharma, there are certain values, certain principles that we hold dear, right? Certain principles, certain values that we may not want to compromise, right? It may not be a good thing to join a company that promotes, for example, alcohol, right? Or alcoholic drinks. And if you say that I observe my precepts, then how are you going to join an organization that promotes alcohol, or drugs for that matter? I mean, you wouldn't join a company that sells illegal drugs, but alcohol, that's for sure, or gambling for that matter. In the, I think even in the Sigalovada Sutta, right, it talks about gambling, right, or Dikajanu Sutta. Buddha talks a lot about the evils of gambling. So you don't want to join a company where, especially at the senior level, you have to promote that particular business. Okay, so it's very important to understand the culture of the company. Okay. Now let's look at for the employee. Okay, so for the respected employee, there's a willingness to make the employer's goals his or her own. Yeah, giving a full day's work, providing value for money. These are the things a worker may take pride in. Showing respect and pride is one of it, both employer and employee. So let's see in the actual translation. What is meant here? So in the actual translation here, it says there are 5 ways in which servants and workers or employees, thus administered to by their master as the nadir, will reciprocate. They will get up before him. Here, what does it mean? Because during the Buddha's time, probably they stay in the same household. Like for example, if you have a domestic helper, right? So it would be very strange. Your domestic, you wake up at 7, your domestic woke up at 9. Isn't it? Right? It's going to be very strange. Okay? Right. So get up before him. Then the second one is go to bed after him. So these are during what the Buddha mentioned. So I think you have to look at it in a bigger context. Take only what they are given. I think you know what it means. Do their work properly and uphold his good reputation. All right. Today, modern says it help to enforce the branding of the organization. The Buddha, of course, wouldn't use the word branding, isn't it? Brand awareness. But you see, interestingly, uphold his good reputation. All right. Okay, let's look at each one of it. Okay. So I think we can look at it as punctuality, isn't it? In our modern context, right? Punctuality. So when you are punctual, it signals that you care for your team members, right? You take your job seriously and you care about meeting deadlines, all right? I always emphasize to my team that if we set a meeting at 9, if you come at 9:10, 9:15, then people wait for you, all right? Then you're not fair to the other people in the team. So if meeting is at 9, you should be there before 9, 5 minutes before 9, so that we start on time and then we can end on time. Right? So those are basic things. So when you're punctual, it signals that you care for your team members. Right? In almost every workplace, punctuality is synonymous with professionalism. Right? So when someone is punctual, it doesn't just mean that they are able to get work on time. It means that you are a professional in that sense. Okay. So I think as an employee, most of us are employees, right? So I think we have to bear that in mind, punctuality. So even if the company has got no punch clock or punch card, right? All right. So I think we should stick to be punctual. Commitment. I think that's the second one. What was the word used there? Go to bed after him. So I think again, you're not sleeping with with your colleagues, with your boss, and so on, right? So what this means, I interpret it as basically you're committed, right? The commitment, having a strong commitment to your work, can potentially create opportunities for growth, and also a love for what you do. All right. So just now I talk about happiness and success, right? So you must have that happiness. Then you can love what you're doing. If you don't love what you are doing, can you imagine, that, I don't know, 8 hours, 9 hours during office time is going to be hell. So you have to love what you're doing, okay? So that commitment. So lack of commitment, right, result in drop in motivation and interest, right? So there are ways to improve commitment and progress the career to make your work more fulfilling. So it's very important for us to have that kind of commitment. Now, sometimes you say, it's how to be committed if you got all kinds of weird people in my office, weird colleagues, all right? So, well, number one, you are in that organization. While you are there, do what you can to overcome that problems. And one way is from the Buddhist perspective. The Buddha says that when you look at difficult people, all right, you can see them as difficult people, or you can look at difficult actions committed by people. So you look at the actions that they perform, then you attach less to the person but to the action. You see? Then that will kind of dilute. Right? But of course, if after 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, you find that the atmosphere is so toxic, it's not good for you working in that kind of an environment, then what choice have you got? You just have to move on. All right? The next job that you look for, make sure that you try to find out more about the culture, whether do they respect each other and things like that. All right? Or is it what they call the dog eat dog kind of organization? All right? So that's the second one. The third one is, I think, integrity. It says, take only what is given to you. Well, you can say you do not steal, but I think basically it means honesty, integrity. And today's corporate world, today's work and environment, integrity is so important. All right? Integrity, right? So integrity at work is about more than just honesty and respect. I think it's more than that. It takes his commitment seriously, is proactive when he doesn't understand his roles and responsibility, ultimately is accountable for the results. So integrity has got to do with responsibility and also your accountability. I think everyone as an employee, we have a particular role and we are also responsible for our actions, isn't it? So that means we must be accountable. All right? We should not be like some people say, I only have responsibility, no accountability. You only find that sometimes you read in the news, some politicians say that, right? So I think it doesn't work. So with integrity, then the business would thrive. So again, if all employees have integrity, business naturally grow, right? So that is why in many organizations we have what is called a compliance culture. Now, compliance culture very much is kind of forced upon you, that you must do this, you must do that, right? Like, in my organization we have got 16 compliance policies that every year an employee must go through, So, but I think more than that, you need to cultivate that inner understanding, inner appreciation of the need for integrity, right? So it's a combination of both. Performance, right? I think this performance is linked to what is called do their work properly, right? In the traditional translation, do their work properly. So here, do the work properly would mean performance, the performance culture, right? Of course, again, these are words which were not used during the Buddha's time. Today, we understand what it means as high performance culture, all right? So one of the most important factors in employee performance to achieve goals. That's why we all have targets, isn't it? You have KRAs or maybe KPIs, and then you got maybe competencies, target to achieve, right? So all those things. And successful employees, they meet deadlines, right? They are goal-oriented because they've got smart objectives, right? And they build the brand via positive customer interactions, right? So all those things are related to the performance culture in an organization. And what happens when employees do not perform effectively? Customers feel the company is apathetic to their needs and will go elsewhere. If your organization have no customers, then very soon you're not going to have your salary. So we need customers, right? we need clients, and so on, right? So the performance part, okay? And because of the Buddhist belief, or many corporate cultures believe that if you give people the opportunity, then they can try. So then from here, from performance, you're able to identify who are the high potential employees in an organization, okay? Because the reality is if you have 1,000 people in an organization, you don't expect 1,000 people to be high potential, right? 1,000 people will contribute, but who among that 1,000 can really be regarded as, someone with maybe some additional extra skill sets that wants to be developed further, all right? Okay, so then through a performance culture, then you're able to identify, okay, who are those with high performance. Someone with high performance need not necessarily be high potential. You know the difference? Someone, a high performer, he can do his job, but he has no potential. He may not want to be a leader in that sense. Right? You can see this very easily in, for example, in insurance industry. In the insurance, especially life insurance, maybe anyone here who sells life insurance? No? Okay. So in a life insurance, you can be a personal producer, or you can be, say, an agency manager, isn't it? So a personal producer, he will produce. He will be maybe what they call a $1 million round table, a court of fellow, He will achieve all his sales targets, but he doesn't manage people. He just grows his sales. An agency manager, his strength or his skills is to manage the downline, to manage maybe the personal producer. So he's rewarded for doing it. The agency manager may not be a top personal producer, but he's very good in managing. But both are performance. So you also need both types of performers. All right? So in an organization, it's very important for us to identify who are the personal producers and who are the leaders. And if you are in a technical organization, again, not every engineer wants to be a general manager, right? So the engineer, his aspirations is to spend more time in R&D or in design. So he wants to be maybe the chief technical officer rather than the chief operating officer. So performance, so again, you look at performance in different perspectives as an employee. So you have to know what are your strengths, what are your interests, okay, and so on. Okay? All right, so the last one, sense of belonging, where he says that, you should always uphold the reputation of your boss. Okay? So here you can say maintaining the boss' good reputation, employees with such behavior do so because of the loyalty to the employer. They see the boss as similar to the ways they will regard a kindly relative or parent rather than gossiping about the employer behind his back. All right? So in another context, it's like helping the company to create a brand value, a positive brand value. Okay, so all those things are essential for us to understand. All right, maybe the Sigalovada Sutta in terms of employer, your role as an employee, right? How you can contribute to the organization, so that there is mutual selection in that sense. Okay, so I think that's basically it. All right, maybe just a couple more slides. So in general, an employee's work satisfaction is largely dependent on the employer to a very large extent, right? It follows that if an employee fulfills these 5 responsibilities as employer, it means that the employer must have treated the employee well in the first place, right? So there's mutual selection. Then the employee would then want to show his gratitude to the employer, right? So in Buddhism, the word gratitude is also a very important aspect of our practice, right? We call it kata anyu, right? So there are also discourses which the Buddha gave about gratitude. And even in Mangala Sutta, one of the 38 blessings is also on gratitude, having gratitude. So likewise, we should always also have, as an employee, we should have gratitude for our employer. Because even though the employer is not perfect, but the employer pays your salary, pays your car maintenance, pays your house, pays your house installments, isn't it? So we have to see it in that context, okay? Because anyway, in this world, in samsara, nothing is perfect, isn't it? So whenever things don't work the way I think it should work, so it always reminds me of what one of my teachers, Lama Zopa, always said, in samsara, nothing is perfect. So that organization that you work for is also in samsara, right? Your organization is not in Pure Land or in Nirvana, right? It's not in Sukhavati, isn't it? Right? Your organization is here in samsara, so it's not perfect. So what can we do to improve? Okay, so we see it in that, and then we become very positive. All right? So then we cultivate what is called positive psychology. Positive psychology, which is very different from traditional psychology. Only looked at depression, neurosis, all the problems that you have. But positive psychology looks at the other aspects, what we call positive emotions. Right? So what are the things that we can develop in life? Okay. So gratitude is a positive emotion that we can cultivate. So I'll just leave you with a last slide, something for you to reflect on. And in this Idipada, there's a called, I think, Vibhanga Idipada Sutta, I think. So there's a discourse which the Buddha gave. The Buddha says these 4 things will lead to success. So as an employee or even as an employer. All right? So 4 things very important. One is, whatever you do, you must have that will. You can call it passion to achieve your goal. As an employee. I think it was as an employer. All right? Like that will or that passion, many companies have what they call 5-year plans. All right? So in the organization I work to, we also have a 5-year plan. So in that 5-year plan, you'll find that everyone is supposed to have that passion to achieve those goals. So that will is important. You see, the Pali word here is chanda. Huh? Sometimes people always say, in Buddhism, this can also be translated as desires, isn't it? The desires to achieve something, right? So sometimes people say, when they study Buddhism, it says that desire is a cause for all our problems, so we should learn to have no desires. Can you live without desires? I think it's impossible. If you have no desires, you won't even come here. If you have no desires, you won't even talk about practicing the 5 precepts or keeping the 5 precepts. So desires are needed. The question is, what type of desire? What type of desires? Okay, so in Buddhism, we make a differentiation between 2 types of desires. All right, desires that lead to harm, the desires that leads to suffering, and we have a word which we use, tanha, okay, in Pali, or trishna in Sanskrit, So it's called tanha. But chanda is the positive form of desire. All right? Sometimes it's called dhamma chanda, isn't it? So that's the will, strong passion to achieve our goals. So as an employee, you must have that passion, that wanting to achieve something. My ex-boss used the word tenacity. I like that word. He always tells me, make sure people who join us have tenacity. He said, sometimes if they're not very smart, that doesn't matter, I'll teach them. But they must have tenacity. That's the way boss talks. Isn't it? So the will, strong passion to achieve our goals, and then you must have the effort, put our plan into action with determination. So you have a vision, you must have action plans. How is it spread down over 5 years, over midterms, maybe 3 years? All right. So from action plans, you have got the how you want to put it into actions, right? Then stay focused, right? So train the mind to accept problems, right? You stay focused, right? If the thing needs to be done, it has to be done. So you're very focused on that particular problem that you want to solve. Okay? So after a lot of discussions, and you know that problem cannot be solved, then we may want to move on to something that can be solved. All right? Maybe it couldn't be solved because of certain regulatory or certain statutory requirements. You see? Now, how are you going to change the statutory or regulatory requirements? So you move on to do something else. That's why it's called to develop a positive attitude. And I'm always inspired by what this great Nalanda Pandit, Shantideva, says. He says that if you come across a problem and you know that problem can be solved, why worry? Solve it. But if that problem, after you analyze, it cannot be solved, why worry? All right? So it makes sense, isn't it? Right? And of course, Shantideva was talking about, about spiritual practice in the Bodhicaya Vatara. Right? But again, when we look at it today, you find that modern psychologists realize the importance of that kind of positive attitude. Okay? So stay focused, all right? But you got to accept that certain problems for the time being cannot be solved. So let it be, and focus on something that can be solved. And we also talk about, like, you've got enormous problems, you go for what we call low-hanging fruits, right? Low-hanging fruits, okay? In other words, you try to solve those that can be easily solved. And then there are different methods, okay? Even in the Buddhist practice, all right? Like, for example, when unwholesome thoughts arise in our mind, the Buddha gave 5 strategies. Remember? 5 strategies, how to overcome them, right? You remember the Vitakka Santana Sutta? Vitakka Santana Sutta, Buddha talks about 5 strategies. How do we overcome our problems? Okay? So there are specific methods. One thing great about the Buddha is when he identifies a problem, he offers solutions. All right? And that solution is for us to try it out. All right? And finally, inquiry. Inquiry is the evaluation. We must always reflect. We must always evaluate. Try to analyze what we are doing. Okay? And in this word, vimamsa means inquiry. In fact, there's a discourse by that name called Vimamsaka Sutta, which is a kind of a companion to the Kalama Sutta. You know Kalama Sutta, right? Kalama Sutta, about the Charter of Free Inquiry. So there's another discourse called the Vimamsaka Sutta, right? So they talk about the need to always have inquiry, right? Okay, so these are the basis of success. So as an employee, yeah.